Hi, my name's Andy Schmuckler. I'm putting out a series here I'm calling A Better Human Story. And I make bold claims that I try to persuade the viewer to take seriously. uh, and I introduce the series with a piece like Introduction to a Big Picture View. And here's the chutzpah that might help human civilization to survive. So in other videos on this series, I've laid out major pieces of this integrative vision, this better human story, which I claim puts into an importantly different light some fundamental questions like what is our nature as human beings, as creatures? And why has the story of our time here on Earth in the last 10,000 years been the way it has? And how should we understand our situation right now, where it appears that there's a genuine possibility we could destroy ourselves? So those are important issues, and I, at the age of 77, are going all out to get the thing out there because I really do think that this will call for some non-trivial ways that we change the way we look at things. And here I want to talk about one way I have of thinking about what it is that I'm putting out there, and what and it's got to do with what I call the secular worldview, which I am part of that, and I'm aware that having a society in which the secular worldview plays such a powerful role is a fairly new historical phenomenon. The even within living memory, I think you can see that there's an emergence of secular culture, replacing to in an ongoing way, gaining territory that had been occupied previously by traditional religions. Not that the traditional religions don't still occupy an important part of our intellectual, cultural, spiritual, moral landscape. But we now have a secular culture which wasn't there to nearly this degree, say, in the time of Lincoln, or even in the time of FDR, I think. I believe, though I'm not sure of this, I believe that I can perceive a change in the magnitude of secular culture. And a lot of it is, a big chapter of the whole thing has got to do with evolution. The view that was part of the traditional view of how we got created, how the world came into being, was dominated by a religious view. I got the Holy Bible up there. Maybe you can see it. It's just over my ear. There's a story behind that book too. The Bible tells a story about in 6 days God created the universe, and the human being was a special creation on the sixth day. And that answers a lot of questions. That first, the book of Genesis about the creation, first couple chapters. but it's not it's not science. And those of us of a secular worldview um, turn to the science. We turn to the evidence, and we can see that uh, life evolved over 3.5 billion years, and we emerged out of a mammalian primate. That's how we see it, and that's sort of indicative of there being a new way of thinking about things that we're still. I mean, a lot of my work, I would say, involves extricating from the evolutionary perspective some important conclusions. Um, and I think that what we need to see is that a new way of thinking, I mean, not that there wasn't always, the secular, rational, empirical ways of thinking. In the Middle Ages, people knew how to fix a broken wheel. But the extent to which people thought about things in a religiously handed down authoritative framework was much greater than it is in our times right now. And one of the results of it being a pretty recent thing is that there are holes in it. There are things that have not been thought out. I don't know if the comparison about time actually works, but I think that the religious frameworks are almost all reflective of a huge accumulation of insights and images of various kinds. That it I'm guessing that it'd be wrong to think of something like Christianity as something that was formed pretty much overnight. Uh, for one thing, it builds on however many, well over 1,000 years of uh, the development of a Jewish tradition from the time of the 5 books of Moses. And um, uh, there's a tradition there that accumulated a whole bunch of different prophets putting out different messages, all the way up to including the book of Job. Uh, the the understanding that people had in religious traditions was probably has to be understood as having taken a fair amount of time for the culture to develop. But regardless of that, it seems evident to me that the secular worldview is underdeveloped, that there are major things that are important and true that should be included in a secular worldview that were included in the religious view. And I want to talk about several of those. I think that the religion had certain things, certain fundamental things right. They had captured, in their terms, certain realities. Uh, and one of the things like, good and evil, I'll get to that. I, we had the religious point of view underscored the importance of there being a spiritual dimension to things. In the secular worldview, that occupies much of liberal America, can I say, but anyway, the secular world. The idea of a spiritual reality, um, it's treated in a second class kind of a way. There is at least major currents in the secular worldview where the idea of there being a spiritual dimension is not given great respect. And there's an earlier video here about how the evolutionary perspective shows the reality of a spiritual dimension. Not only that it's real, but also that it is important. And not only that, but that it is demonstrably life-serving, which is why we evolved to have the capacity to have a certain kind of experience, which people have always regarded as having a spiritual quality, and which is regarded as very impactful, and which has clearly been crafted into our nature to have the capacity for that, which proves that it's life-serving. Similarly, with the moral dimension, the secular worldview has adopted a view of reality which basically confines it to what's objective, out there. If it's in here, well, it's merely subjective. Well, some of it's subjective, though I don't know if anything's merely much of anything. But some of it's subjective. I mean, we each have our individuality, we have our own history and our own personalities. Okay, but there's a lot in there that isn't merely subjective. I call it our inborn experiential tendencies. And inborn means that it was selected for. Use the evolutionary perspective to see what's reality, and part of what's reality is experience. Evolution has crafted us to have a dimension of experience that we experience some things as positive and some things as negative. Some things are better and some things are worse. That is crafted into us. And it's done so for a reason. If we experience certain things as positive, we're going to seek those experiences out. And selection goes in there to craft us so that we will seek out, will we behave in certain ways, which were correlated with our ancestors being able to survive. Those who had those inborn experiential tendencies were more likely to do what was required for survival. That's why we got them. And there are a bunch of them. One of them is that we experience things as better and as worse. And that, by the way, is where value enters the world. If you're looking for value out there, you're not going to find it. There's no way anything could be of any value except in terms of it being better experientially for some creatures that experience things in terms of better and worse. I mean, it could include God, who says, oh, I look at the light and it say is good. Okay, well, I'm happy to give value to the Creator being pleased. But other than that, you've got creatures like us. And only through people or dogs or cats or all the other things, however far down it goes, that do experience things in better and worse, that's the only way that the value could exist, is in something feeling good, meaningful, fulfilling. That's the only place value could be. And nothing else makes sense. So value is something which emerges into reality. When the lifeless universe was all there was, if indeed lifeless universe was once all there was, as far as I can tell, that's what science would say. When that was the case, there was nothing of value. It didn't matter whether a planet blew up or a galaxy spun out of control or collided with another galaxy. What difference does it make? But there's an emergent thing, and that is when life starts and um, and evolution gradually starts creating things that are crafted to be able to survive. And one of the strategies is, and I don't know if it goes down to protozoa, I don't know what to do about plants, but we know that for us and a lot of our mammalian friends, it really does make a difference. To make ourselves, we're part of the strategy for survival was to give good feeling to motivate behavior, which led to survival. Value gets to be real and important and life-serving. It's built into us. And therefore, I'm not going to do this here, but you can derive that the moral dimension of things, which a secular worldview gives short shrift to, or that's not the right phrase in this case, but you know what I mean. Second-class reality, not really real, just a matter of opinion. Like I've had students say to me, well, what the Nazis did at Auschwitz isn't what I would have done, but they thought it was right, so it was right for them. Relativism is one of the things which goes with this. And of course, there's no, completely clear-cut stuff, but the dimension is real, and it is built into us. And the good emerges in relation to that. We are motivated to seek the kinds of fulfillment which are at the core of the good. All that really derives from looking further into the implications of the evolutionary framework. It's not just a matter of an anatomy. It's also a matter of selection for experiential tendencies. And another one, besides the better and worse, again, there's a spiritual one, which is that it's clear, factually, empirically, it's right there in front of our eyes, that the capacity for spiritually transformative experience is widespread in the human genome. We know because there's, every culture is enshrined some of this stuff near its core, and there are many lives, probably not a majority, but a significant minority of lives distributed throughout humanity of people who've had experiences that sort of take them into a deeper level that feels more valid, more true, more real, that delivers some kind of spiritual truth, and that comes with kind of impact that changes the course of lives. The parable of the tribes was one such experience in my life, and it changed the course of my life. And it did deliver some important spiritual truths, which have been at the center of my life. And there are lots of people with different kinds of experience of a spiritually transformative nature, which feel like they enter into almost a different dimension of meaning and truth and reality. Not a second-class dimension, but on the contrary, this is where it's at kind of a dimension. So if we have evolved to have that capacity, we can infer things in an evolutionary perspective. We can infer that those ancestors of ours, hunter-gatherers, I assume, though who knows, maybe the apes have got, some of this going on too, I don't know. But we certainly find that in hunter-gatherers, there are, shamans and, like that. And we can imagine that this capacity, sometimes aided by consciousness-altering substances, but in any event, even that capacity to be able to use sacred mushrooms or ayahuasca experiments but the capacity to enter into a realm of sort of getting some fundamental, deep truth and having an impact that sends a person in a particular direction. If those things got selected for so that it's in there in our genome, that means that the ancestors who had those capacities were more likely to survive than, you know, if it was a lousy thing to have that, it would have been removed. But on the contrary, it seems to have become very widespread. So we know that somehow the impact it had must have been life-serving. And we could study, the anthropological literature and the historical and religious literature and find all kinds of examples. Well, what exactly did it, was the effect of Joan of Arc's visions, or, Paul being struck by lightning, and all the other things that have happened to people. And I think we would come up with a whole variety of visions of, but I think we would probably find that basically it looks like the impact was life-serving. I'm guessing that when the shamans of Siberia came back from their visionary experiences, that they had messages for their little communities in these basically hunting, gathering kinds of cultures. I bet that they had things to say that, in balance over the many generations, listening to what the people, the shamans had to say, it was conducive to the survival of the group and the passing of the people's DNA into the human future. And so it's evidence that would be evidence that why it is that it's in there. Well, the secular worldview isn't looking to the spiritual dimension for the most part. I mean, maybe I'm doing an injustice to some people who would say, well, I honor the spiritual dimension, and my point of view is secular too. But I think that there's a tendency in today's secular society not to be looking to that as a hyper reality in a sense, but instead to be somewhat dismissive as sort of an illusory apparent reality. That's the impression it makes. Well, it's merely subjective. Look at all the religions, they disagree with each other. Anyway, I see my Better Human story as filling in a few of those things that the religious perspectives had. A respect for the spiritual, a respect for the division between um, uh, the better and the worse. To do the evolutionary perspective needs to be cultivated, developed further in order to fill in some holes that are costly. And the reason these holes are costly are that if you don't see the hole, you're not likely to be very good at moving things where they need to go. And the secular worldview, if it doesn't have, for example, deep contact with the moral and spiritual dimensions, not that either of them provide clear, easy answers, but they all call attention to some vital dimensions of reality. If you don't have contact with those, you're not going to be in touch with the passions that are called for when the good is at stake, when the sacred is at stake, if you don't take them that seriously. So I think the Better Human Story provides an intellectually developed way, not only that justifies taking them seriously, but that demands that it be taken seriously. If we're going to side with life against death, we need to side with good against evil, with the sacred against what would destroy it, because those are dimensions of the drama, and that's another part of the secular worldview that I'm seeking to fill a hole in. In the current secular worldview, the idea of a force of evil is dismissed. We don't believe in Satan. No evidence to support that. Not if you're going to come to your conclusions the way we believe in it. So why should one talk about a force of evil? Well, the thing is, it can be shown, which is one of the things that I'm trying to show, that the step onto the path of civilization inevitably unleashes a force. First of all, it's a social evolutionary force, but it has ramifications as that force is moving brokenness through the human world over considerable periods of time. You can see it. You can see how brokenness is producing brokenness in the network of cause and effect. The original plunge into a war of all against all, which you can already tell there's brokenness there. And you can already imagine, if you just put your mind to it, what's that going to do to the rest of the human world if that's what's going on? Chronic warfare, people being exterminated or enslaved, or battlefields covered with corpses. You can tell where that's going, and there's a lot of pain in that, and people being enslaved and societies getting shaped into a form that is hostile to human needs, at least in some fundamental ways. So you get to see that there's each form of brokenness moves things into other forms of brokenness and is itself the product of brokenness that going all the way back to the social evolutionary force that grows out of a war of all against all, which means the selection for the ways of power, which means that the spirit of the gangster will have a disproportionate say in shaping the human world. You can see that there is going to inevitably emerge a coherent force that consistently makes things more broken. This is sort of what we can derive from what it means to step out of the natural order into anarchy. So the secular worldview doesn't have a place for evil. I mean, this is one thing that I have a lot of experience of, because I started in 2005 trying to talk to the liberal world. I saw fascism rising. I was in a state over what I saw. I tried to convey an idea of the dark force that was visibly taking over the American right. And I had a ringside seat for this, by the way. Unusual for a liberal to be doing lots of talk radio in the middle of rural, semi-rural, and rural Virginia, traditionalist, Republican, fundamentalist to some extent, and definitely quite conservative. Doing lots and lots of talk radio. And I had a ringside seat is the expression I was looking for, to watch a transformation take place as a coherent force came in and grabbed the minds of these people to spread a pattern of brokenness. Anyway, I was trying to raise the alarm about what I saw, starting actually in the fall of, well, a little bit about with gatekeepers of the radio world in the 1990s who said, well, Rush Limbaugh's audience is not our concern. It was my concern. But especially after 2004 when I saw what I saw. So anyway, I know how liberal America regards the idea of evil. I started writing about the concept of evil, why it is intellectually valid and politically and spiritually important was the name of a major piece I used to sort of launch my effort to reach the good people on the right and to awaken the secular world to what's rising on the right. I'll just tell you, I got so much grief for using the word evil. And it's not a fight worth having, except it is kind of worth having because I think the word evil helps us get the feeling that we're best motivated to have about the ugliness. I mean, you could call this coherent force that consistently spreads a pattern of brokenness, you could call it a force of brokenness. Intellectually, nothing is lost. No need for the word evil. I actually think that is an excellent definition of evil, and I've been working on the question of evil for a long time. I think a coherent force, I think it does the job. But anyway, there's no need for the word evil. But I think that viscerally and at the level of the heart and soul, there is a revulsion or, what it is that Luther's responding to when he smells or hallucinates sulfur. There's something about evil that sort of has an impact on us as human beings. Talk about the force of brokenness. I mean, we're getting off into our heads, and this battle requires our heads, but it also requires our wholeheartedness. So I like the word evil for that reason. And not personified, no devil, but it's a coherent force that consistently works to make things in the human world worse. And it's important to see it in order to have that feeling. One of the things I propose for the parable of the tribes in terms of, envisioning a force and having the visceral reaction to it. There's a painting by Goya where you can see this colossus off in the distance on the other side of a mountain range, sort of tracking along while some kind of a massacre or something involving Napoleonic troops killing Spanish peasants is going on in the valley. Well, we didn't use that on the cover. What we've got is two rock paintings of like one tribe armed with bows and arrows chasing another tribe off the territory, which was a wall painting in northern Africa from about 9,000 years ago. So the parable of the tribes had begun. It was my editor who found that, not me. I think it's a great choice for that book. Going back to the secular worldview, In baseball, it is said you can't hit what you can't see. And I believe that part of why it has been possible for something so dark to become so powerful in America that here in the latter months of 2023, the survival of American democracy is very much in jeopardy. One of the main reasons for that is that liberal America and the Democratic Party, which is its political arm, which is also, I think, substantially to be understood as the political and cultural home of people with a secular worldview. Not that everybody on that side is secular, but that it was unable to see what was happening and failed to fight back a gathering danger early on when it was less of a threat and would have been more easily defeated. If, as soon as the Republican Party had started to become something that should be called out for the evil that it is, and I would say the era of Limbaugh and Gingrich, it was already clearly there. As soon as that happened, it should have been visible what was rising there. But the liberal world wasn't looking for something like that because it doesn't believe in the kind of spirit that would express itself through human beings like Rush Limbaugh. Think of what kind of human being that is. Newt Gingrich. We all know quite a bit about what kind of human being that is. The Koch brothers. That was also there. And Rupert Murdoch and Roger Ailes and then Karl Rove. It was pretty clear, pretty often, that there was something rising on the right and gaining control that had no basic values or integrity, was willing to do pretty much anything to get what it wants. I mean, just a particular image. If you think about how Gingrich was in denouncing Clinton's immorality with Monica Lewinsky, and then, not that long later, we find out what was going on with Gingrich of a more serious nature, having to do with dishonoring of his marital vows and all that. It just gives you an idea of, like, if you can be that much of a hypocrite, there's no limit. It was visible. But even as late as into the Trump years, there have been Democrats who talk about their friends across the aisle. Anyway, I know that liberal America resists the idea. I mean, a lot of it does, because I've dealt with people. I mean, I had my own website, nonesoblind.org, where I was continually posting these things, and I wasn't always talking about evil, and I almost always would say, call it what you want, because I had learned that people thought that they knew what I meant by evil, and no, there is no Satan, and why are you condemning evil people? Once you start talking about evil like that, you're no better than those people on the right who are calling us baby killers. I'm not interested in talking about evil people. We are all the fruits of the world, as I see it. And I'm interested in talking about the coherent force because that's what needs to be defeated. I'm not interested in if that force can be defeated. It's not like I have a need for revenge on the people who are lending their shoulders to that force, Trump and his followers and like that. I'm willing to live and let live as long as the world is going to be taken care of okay. Whatever it takes to help the human world become what the human world should be and could be. Could be if we controlled what it became, which we have not. I mean, civilization has been out of control. That is also, something. That's not a matter of filling a hole, um, like these other points to correct what's missing in the secular worldview that hasn't yet filled in all the implications of evolutionary perspective. It's not filling a hole to say, it's not filling a hole to say human civilization has been developing out of control from the beginning. And again, it's not 100% true. I really wouldn't know. I wouldn't feel confident about saying what percentage true it is that civilization has been out of control. But I do think that it has been, in a fundamental way, out of control from the beginning. And we can infer that, I think, from the way there's so much evidence that uh, from 10,000 years ago to 5,000 years ago, um, the, the trip was definitely downhill for the average human being. I think that can be pretty well proven empirically in terms of their diet, in terms of the conditions of their lives, and their general health. So that's evidence that it was out of control for to get to that point. Has it been under better control since then? But the secular worldview should understand not only that the civilization's been out of control, but also that the challenge that we face, because we are the civilization creating creature, is to bring the social evolutionary process under control. That's how to conceive of this, because inevitably, uh, a creature that steps onto that path will eventually get to the point where it might destroy itself. And it'll be some kind of a race to see whether the forces of wholeness can get them, off the path toward self-destruction in time. It's not clear whether we're in time. I could be more encouraged, but we might have 200 years to get it together. We might be able to do that. We sure as hell gotta give it our best try. And I say that the better human story provides certain additions to the secular worldview that hold water, that elaborate on the evolutionary perspective we've got on how things are and how things work, and that could help us in some way that's big enough to concern ourselves about. navigate ourselves to a future where human lives are thriving and fulfilling, and where life on Earth is doing fine, having a civilization from our species implanted in it. That's what the good would say is the desirable outcome. And that's what the spiritual dimension has said to me in driving me in developing this better human story and asking you to try it on, because we've got some big jobs to do. And this is one tool that can be of some assistance in possibly succeeding in meeting this inevitable central challenge facing us, the civilization creating creature. That's the world as I see it. I feel like signing off like Edward R. Murrow. Good night and good luck. Bye-bye.